The late afternoon sun cast a soft golden glow across the sprawling Walker estate. From the long driveway lined with oaks to the iron gates that stood at the entrance, everything about the property spoke of wealth and generations of privilege. Visitors often stopped their cars just to admire the view, snapping photos of the endless green lawns and the mansion with its white columns shining like marble in the distance. But on that particular afternoon, the man standing at the gates didn't look like he belonged to such grandeur. His old Navy uniform was faded at the seams, hanging loosely on his lean frame. His cap sat low on his forehead, shielding tired eyes. His hands, rough from age and hard work, gripped the iron bars in front of him, not in defiance, but as if they were the only thing holding him upright. To anyone driving by, he was invisible, just another aging gatekeeper, a man paid a modest wage to open and close the gates of a house that could never be his. Nobody would have guessed that this man was Henry Walker, the billionaire who owned not just the estate, but land across the country, businesses in half the world, and a fortune that spanned generations. But Henry wasn't at the gate to remind the world of his wealth. He was there for something far more important, his only son's future. Henry's son, Davy, had always been the light of his life. After Henry's wife, Margaret, passed away years earlier, David became the one thing keeping him grounded. Margaret had been the love of Henry's life, a woman who had known him long before the wealth, before the mansions when he was just a young man with big dreams. She had taught him humility, kindness, and the belief that true character is revealed not in success, but in how one treats others when there's nothing to gain. David had grown up surrounded by privilege, yet Henry had tried hard to raise him with those same values. He had wanted his son to be strong, grounded, and compassionate. But now, as David entered adulthood, Henry felt the weight of fear pressing on him. David was engaged to Naomi, a young woman of breathtaking beauty. Her smile could light up a room, her laughter could turn heads, and her sense of style was flawless. On paper, she seemed like the perfect partner. She came from a respectable family, carried herself with confidence, and seemed deeply in love with David. But Henry wasn't convinced. He had seen too much in his life: business partners who betrayed him, friends who disappeared when money wasn't involved, and marriages around him that had collapsed under the weight of selfishness. He knew that beauty and charm could hide a cold heart, and he would not, stand by and watch his son marry someone who would eventually hurt him. So he made a decision that would test not just Naomi's heart, but his own courage as a father. Henry decided to disguise himself as a simple gatekeeper for a week. The plan was simple but revealing. If Naomi had kindness in her heart, she would notice him. If she was shallow, selfish, or cruel, her behavior would show when she believed he was just a poor old man who could offer her nothing. Only Henry's most trusted assistant knew the truth. Everyone else, including David and Naomi, would believe the estate had hired a new guard. Henry traded his tailored suits for the worn Navy uniform, exchanged polished leather shoes for old work boots, and lowered himself into the shadows of the gatehouse. On the outside, it was just an experiment. But on the inside, Henry knew this was the most important test of his life. The first morning, Naomi arrived in a shiny black SUV, the kind that reflected the sunlight like a mirror. She stepped out gracefully, her diamond bracelet catching the golden light. The scent of expensive perfume drifted in the air as she walked toward the gates. Henry, standing tall but humble, nodded politely. "Good morning, miss," he said. "Yesly?" Naomi didn't even look his way. Her phone was pressed against her ear, her laughter ringing out as she walked past him. She didn't acknowledge the man who had pulled the heavy gates open for her. Henry said nothing. He had not expected much from the first day, but in his heart he had hoped for at least a smile, a word, a flicker of recognition. Day after day, the pattern continued. Naomi arrived, beautifully dressed, phone in hand, eyes ahead. Henry opened the gates in the blazing sun, in pouring rain in the cool of the morning. But never once did she say, "Thank you." Never once did she look him in the eye. Then came the day that broke his heart. Naomi arrived earlier than usual, stepping out of her car in a striking red dress that stood out against the pale stone walls of the estate. But her beauty was overshadowed by the irritation on her face. She muttered under her breath, clearly upset about something. Henry, as always, opened the gate with quiet respect. He stepped aside, ready to let her pass. But instead of walking through, Naomi paused. A smirk crept across her lips. In her hand was a half-full bottle of soda. Without a word, she tilted it and poured the sticky liquid over Henry's head. The cold drink soaked his cap, streamed down his weathered face, and clung to the fabric of his uniform. Naomi laughed, a sharp, cruel laugh, and walked away as if nothing had happened. Henry stood frozen, his heart clenched. In that moment, he thought of Margaret. He could hear her voice as clearly as if she were standing beside him. "Henry, you see a person's soul in how they treat those who can give them nothing." Tears stung his eyes, though he blinked them away. He felt humiliation, anger, and sorrow, all at once. But above all, he felt certainty. Still, Henry didn't act immediately. A part of him wanted to be wrong. He wanted to believe that Naomi had simply been having a terrible day, that her cruel action was out of character. So he waited. For the next few days, he continued his role as the gatekeeper. He hoped desperately that Naomi might come back to apologize, that she might show remorse, that perhaps he had judged too quickly, but the apology never came. Naomi carried on as though nothing had happened. If anything, she seemed more dismissive than before, her eyes gliding past him as if he were less than the stones beneath her feet. Each day, Henry's heart grew heavier. He thought of David, of the love his son believed he had found, and he knew the truth would soon break him. But better a broken heart now, Henry thought, than a ruined life later. The week came to an end. Henry shed the old Navy uniform and returned to the man he had been for decades, the billionaire patriarch, strong and dignified. He put on a tailored suit, polished his shoes, and looked in the mirror at the face of a man who carried both authority and grief. That evening, he summoned David and Naomi to the grand hall of the estate. The chandeliers glowed, casting light on the polished marble floors that had witnessed countless family gatherings. David looked puzzled, unsure why his father had called such a serious meeting. Naomi entered with confidence, her heels clicking against the floor. When Henry walked in, Naomi's eyes widened. The frail, hunched gatekeeper was gone. In his place stood a man radiating quiet power. "Dad?" David asked, confused. Henry nodded. "Yes, son, and there's something you need to know." He turned to Naomi, his eyes steady. "For the past week, I have been the gatekeeper you ignored, the man you poured soda on, the man who was invisible to you until you decided he was an object of ridicule." Naomi's face turned pale. I didn't know. It was just a joke. I didn't mean." Henry raised a hand, gently stopping her. His voice was calm, not angry, but firm. "Love without respect is like a house built on sand. It cannot last." David's eyes darted between them, his hand slipping slowly from Naomi's grasp. The silence in the hall was heavy, as though even the walls were listening. The engagement ended that night, not with shouting, not with anger, but with quiet truth. Naomi left in tears, her excuses trailing behind her like smoke. David was devastated. For weeks, he struggled with heartbreak, replaying every memory he had shared with Naomi. But as time passed, he began to see clearly. His father had not destroyed his happiness. He had saved him from a future of pain. Months later, David met someone new. She was not flashy, not adorned with jewels or diamonds, but her kindness shone brighter than any accessory. She listened when he spoke, laughed at his jokes, and treated everyone around her with respect. The first time she visited the estate, she walked up to the real gatekeeper, shook his hand, and said warmly, "Thank you for your work. It means a lot." Henry, watching from the window, felt tears well in his eyes. This time they were tears of relief. One evening, Henry sat on the porch, the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He watched David and the young woman walking in the garden, their laughter echoing through the air. For the first time in many months, Henry felt the heavy weight in his chest lift. Margaret's voice seemed to whisper again in his heart. "You did right, Henry. You protected him." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to HOA Secrets. In the comments, tell us, do you think Henry did the right thing? Have you ever seen someone's true character revealed in an unexpected moment? Life doesn't always reveal truth in big, dramatic moments. Sometimes it shows itself in the small things. A smile, a thank you, a moment of patience, or sadly, a flash of cruelty. Henry's story reminds us of something timeless, that kindness and respect are the real foundations of love. Without them, Even the grandest relationship will crumble. But with them, love becomes a home that can weather any storm.